My name is Rebecca, and for the last few months, I've been trying to find the truth. But honestly, for most of that time, I've been lost. I work for HITRECORD.org, an online community of artists who work together to make all types of art. Back in February, we launched a project called Are You There, Democracy? It's Me, the Internet, where we ask people around the world to answer the question,
is today's technology good or bad for democracy? That's the question that I'd like to answer for this project I'm starting right now.
Is
today's technology
good or bad
for democracy today?
Well,
I'm an editor, so I spend most of my day searching through submissions. A few months ago, I came across a video from a community member named Amohst.
So why is technology good for democracy? Well, first, it actually gives us the ability to prevent terror attacks. Let's take mass surveillance. While yes, it may compromise our personal privacy, the cold hard fact is that it is saving lives. Since 2001, mass surveillance has countered 50 terrorist attacks worldwide, actually. The cold hard fact is that mass surveillance is saving lives.
Mass surveillance is saving lives. This was the statement that really got my attention. We reviewed Amohst's video around the office. People had a lot of different reactions. In particular, it stood out to Jo, our director. The information she had was so different to what he had heard.
So obviously, I'm not an expert on this, but I did do a bunch of reading on this kind of topic when I played Edward Snowden in a movie, and my understanding of the facts is that mass surveillance programs, they've been ineffective. They haven't been proven to actually stop any terrorist attacks. When she says the cold hard facts is that it's saving lives and it's stopped, I think she said 50 terrorist attacks. I think the NSA itself said we've stopped 54 terrorist attacks, but frankly, they haven't been proven to be exactly trustworthy in this. They've been proven to sort of lie a few times. So I would question that number.
Curious about whether Amohst or Jo was right, I did what anybody would do these days. I Googled it. I found a lot of information, some of which lined up with Amohst, and some with Jo, and some with neither, which seemed crazy to me. This was such a big subject, such an important subject. How could there not be a definitive answer? There must be. So I decided to find it. I thought the first step was to get in touch with Amohst.
Hey, how are you?
That's Amohst. Her real name is Sabrina. She's a high school senior in Madison, Alabama.
What made you want to contribute to this project?
I had previously spent 7 months researching and debating mass surveillance, and I just felt compelled to contribute to it.
Turns out, Sabrina had been in a debate team the year before, researching this exact topic.
Personally, before researching, I would automatically say mass surveillance is inherently evil, they're spying on us. I know when I was debating, we were forced to look at it from both sides.
In your video, you said something like, the cold hard fact is that, mass surveillance is saving lives. You were debating the other side too, so I'm sure you found a ton of things saying that it doesn't. Did you ever feel like you really got clarity on anything?
I mean, I think truth exists somewhere, but I think that it does get difficult sometimes to tell which information is reliable and which one isn't.
In fact, this was a running theme throughout a lot of the footage I reviewed for this project.
So the internet basically puts all this information at your disposal.
A lot of information can be overwhelming, and people don't know how to handle that.
I have seen people start to get less information from the internet or wrong information from the internet and get the facts completely wrong.
So how much information's out there, and how much of it can we trust? I posted a video on HITRECORD asking the question,
Has mass surveillance ever stopped a terrorist attack?
According to NBC News, General Keith Alexander says dozens of terrorist attacks have been stopped from mass surveillance.
One source, the Washington Times, stated that the NSA has only stopped about 1 or 2 terrorist attacks.
According to abcnews.com, over 50 terror plots were foiled.
So there's a disagreement on the number, but it seems like mass surveillance does prevent terrorist attacks.
NSA Director Keith Alexander admits he lied about phone surveillance stopping 54 terror plots. And this is on allgov.com.
The article on top of the cat is theguardian.com. There is not even a single case in which the intelligence aid services have demonstrated that mass surveillance has stopped a terrorist attack.
If you listen to these other sources, it doesn't seem like mass surveillance is helping stop terrorist attacks at all.
On Washington blog, Bill Binney, who's the former head of the NSA's global intelligence gathering operations, said that mass surveillance actually interferes with the government's ability to catch these bad guys. The government failed to stop Boston bombings, the Texas shooting, because it was overwhelmed with data.
So not only is it not able to stop attacks, but mass surveillance is actually making it harder.
I found on dig.com, whenever we learn about NSA success, it comes from targeted surveillance rather than mass surveillance.
Wait, so what is this targeted surveillance?
Targeted surveillance is when law enforcement has probable cause to suspect a particular target, obtains a warrant, and conducts surveillance on that target. Mass surveillance is when law enforcement just conducts surveillance on huge numbers of people without any warrants or probable cause to suspect the people being surveilled.
I found on opendemocracy.net that mass surveillance has not proved effective in the prevention of terrorist attacks, whereas targeted surveillance has.
Here's an article on WashingtonExaminer.com that says, targeted surveillance could be the new weapon against terrorism.
Okay, so maybe it's targeted surveillance that saves lives.
Here's an article from Slate.com. The NSA's targeted surveillance is looking less targeted all the time.
So I found on ProPublica.org that thousands or millions of people might be examined when investigating a single target.
So if targeted surveillance isn't really targeted, then is it just mass surveillance under a different name? And if targeted surveillance saves lives, then you could say mass surveillance saves lives as well. So we're pretty much back where we started, and I don't feel any closer to the truth. I wonder what Sabrina thinks of all of this. Tell me what you thought of all the stuff we found.
You start to realize that maybe the internet is not so black and white. I think that, internet is going to have little bits of information to support every side, and you have to look a lot deeper before trusting it at face value. I know when we were looking into different mass surveillance research for our debate, the trouble is that sometimes certain sites tend to have more of an inherent bias than others.
Most of the information on the internet is secondhand. It comes through a filter of whichever website or blog you're reading, and a lot of times the line is blurred between fact and opinion, so it's hard to judge. When you were in your debate and you were kind of coming to a conclusion, who judged that?
When you get to the final rounds, you have a panel of 5 experts. One of them was AlexAbdo, who's a surveillance attorney from ACLU.
We were actually partnered with the ACLU for this project, so I reached out to Alex to see if he, as an expert judge from Sabrina's debate, had any tips for finding the truth. Can you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
My name is AlexAbdo, and I'm a staff attorney at the ACLU, and I litigate privacy and surveillance cases against the government.
We've been trying to find out if mass surveillance saves lives, but all the different things we find all are contradicting each other. How can you tell what to trust?
I think it's very difficult to know what to trust on the internet, and one of the main metrics that I use is to try to assess the incentives of whoever it is who's reporting the information to you. And so when the NSA comes out and defends their programs and they say these programs have stopped X number of attacks, they have a very obvious incentive to inflate those numbers and exaggerate the truth. And so I approach those sorts of claims with a healthy bit of skepticism. In the past, we have always relied on others to filter the wheat from the chaff. And the media has traditionally played that role. They investigate, they follow leads, they ask critical questions. But today, media is very diverse. There are hundreds and thousands of different sources online. And you have to develop a sense over time of what is trustworthy and what isn't. I look very often to investigative journalism, to official pieces put out by groups that don't have an axe to grind, who are just interested in finding the truth. But it's not so easy for the average person to tell the difference between those in column A and those in column B. That's what makes it so hard.
So where did that leave us with our question of whether mass surveillance saves lives?
I think there's intuitive appeal to the argument. It might make sense that if you collect more information, you're going to get something useful. And that is probably true in the abstract.
I think it may not prevent all attacks, but if it even prevents just one, or if it helps to thwart one attack, then it's worth keeping it in that government toolbox for intelligence gathering.
The question is not whether if you collect everything under the sun, you're going to find something useful, because of course you're going to find something useful. The real question is, could you accomplish something with mass surveillance that you couldn't accomplish through targeted surveillance? There are now 2 governmental reports, both of which concluded that mass surveillance didn't help the NSA with anything they couldn't have gotten through targeted surveillance.
If giving up our privacy doesn't lead to added security, then we should know that. And if we can achieve the same level of security without losing our privacy, then that's better. But ultimately, it's a judgment call.
These are debatable questions, and they're complicated, and there's lots of different opinions that you can have that are valid.
Ultimately, whether the NSA collects information on all of us is a question for our democracy, for the people who are electing the representatives. But you can't have informed decision-making, informed democracy, unless you have the basic facts.
The question is, where does your opinion come from? Are you just kind of taking someone's word for it, or are you finding out for yourself?
We need to know the facts before we can decide how the government should use technology. And increasingly, we're relying on technology and the internet to get this information.
The internet, kind of offers both sides of the coin. On the one hand, there's a lot of stuff on the internet that is hearsay and rumors. But on the other hand, if you put in the effort, you can use the internet to find more evidence, more facts, and form your opinion in a more solid way.
The question we started with was, is technology good or bad for democracy? And I think it's both, and neither. Because technology, whether it's surveillance tech or the internet we use every day, relies entirely on how we, the people, decide to use it.